On page 188 of the hardcover edition of his book, The Blank Slate, Steven Pinker says we don't need Christianity to teach us about morality because all societies forbid rape and murder and other bad things like that. Pinker is totally wrong. Look at suttee. It is spelled S as in Sam, U-T-T-E-E, and you can look it up in Wikipedia or in the Encyclopedia Britannica or in any good encyclopedia. Suttee was the custom in India of burning a widow to death by tying her up and throwing her, alive, onto her husband's funeral pyre, and it was widespread for centuries in India. Let me stress, this was not a punishment for crime. Even if everyone thought she was the nicest lady in the world, they would still do that to her when her husband died. It was abolished only when European Christians took over India. Pinker himself admits this on page 136 of his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature. And look at gladiatorial games. Highly intelligent Roman emperors such as Augustus and Marcus Aurelius saw nothing wrong with them. How can Pinker claim that all societies forbid murder when the Roman Empire allowed men to kill each other as a popular form of entertainment? But Christianity put a stop to gladiatorial games. You can read about that on pages 194 to 206 of the book Gladiators, History's Most Deadly Sport, by a history professor named Feek Meyer. And look at the fact that the pagan Romans had a law that required that any baby that was deformed had to be immediately killed. Let me stress, this was not just an option that the parents had. It was a requirement. You can find that rule on Table 4 of the 12 Tables of Roman Law. The text of the 12 tables can be found on several websites, and of course you can also find out about them by going to any good university and talking to a professor who specializes in Roman history. How can Pinker claim all societies forbid murder when the ancient Romans had that law? Look, think about Tom Dempsey, the famous NFL place kicker. He was born without a right hand and with only half of his right foot. So apparently the pagan Romans would have had him put to death right at birth. It was Christianity that got rid of that law. Any college professor who specializes in Roman history will also tell you that in ancient Rome, if a rich man wanted to rape his slaves, both male and female, both adult and minor, that was not illegal or considered immoral. Therefore, how can Pinker claim all societies forbid rape? It was the Christians who said that raping a slave was immoral. In the American South, every Christian clergyman believed it was immoral for a slave owner to rape a slave. I dare anyone to find a Christian clergyman in the South who ever said otherwise. If everyone knows that murder is bad, as Pinker claims, why did the atheists who ruled China refuse to impose economic sanctions on Sudan when the Sudanese government was committing mass murder in Darfur? You can read about this in an editorial in the October 20th, 2009 New York Times. The atheists who ruled China did that because they made a lot of money by trading with Sudan, and as long as they got their money, they didn't care about people being murdered in some faraway country. You could grind up the people of Darfur for dog food, and the atheists who ruled China wouldn't care, as long as they got their money. The only reason why people in the United States and Western Europe wanted to stop the mass murder in Darfur is because the United States and Western Europe are societies that have a Christian foundation. Look at Charles Darwin's son Leonard. He said if his wife gave birth to an incurably blind baby, he would want the baby put to death. He saw no reason why he should have to spend time and money raising a handicapped child. You can read about this on page 117 of the book The Twilight Years, The Paradox of Britain Between the Wars, by Richard Overy. Overy is spelled O-V-E-R-Y if you want to look up that book in your local library. St. Augustine of Hippo was a famous Christian theologian who lived in the Roman Empire in the 4th and 5th centuries. When he was born, and for several centuries before that, the standard Roman pagan belief was that if a woman became a rape victim, she should kill herself. This, the pagan Romans believed, was the only way a rape victim could regain her honor. St. Augustine changed that attitude. You can read about this on pages 114 and 115 of the book St. Augustine by the famous historian Gary Wills. His name is spelled W-I-L-L-S if you want to look him up in your local library. St. Augustine wrote that suicide was a sin, and that being a rape victim was certainly not a sin. He insisted that rape victims did not need to commit suicide to regain their honor, because they had never lost their honor. They had done nothing wrong. Because of St. Augustine's tremendous prestige, his arguments carried the day and became the standard viewpoint in Christian Europe. One has to wonder how many rape victims' lives were saved because of Christianity. So often we hear atheists praising this or that pagan philosopher, Socrates or Lucretius or Marcus Aurelius or whomever. But did any of those pagan philosophers stand up for rape victims as St. Augustine did? Not that I ever heard. In ancient China, Confucius also taught that rape victims should commit suicide. You can read about this on pages 79 and 81 of a book called Global Crisis: War, Climate Change, and Catastrophe in the 17th Century by Jeffrey Parker. The ancient Roman law code also said that a man could have his wife put to death if she committed adultery. You can read about this on page 21 of a book called A History of Their Own: Women in Europe from Prehistory to the Present, Volume 1, by Bonnie Anderson and Judith Zinzer. Jesus changed that. He said adulterers should not be put to death, so that became the rule in Christian Europe. You can read about that in the Gospel of John, chapter 8. One can only speculate on how many lives were saved because of what Jesus said. Somehow the atheists never find time to talk about that when they are claiming that Christianity has done nothing to improve the world. And look at the fact that a team of Harvard researchers have found that young men who go to church every week have a much lower crime rate than young men who don't. You can read about this in an article by Richard B. Freeman in the July 20th, 1986 New York Times. So where does Pinker get this idea that we don't need Christianity to teach us about morality? He isn't paying attention to the facts.